Perfect. So I hope you're able to see. What I will do is in a minute, I will spotlight my video so that you can only be able to see what my screen is on there. Welcome. Really nice to have so many people join us again. Obviously, we did the first one last week. The idea behind this isn't necessarily well by Craig Spicer. It's more about getting people together.
Craig,
giving you voice.
Can you mute everybody's microphone, mate? Because we can't hear you very well, bud.
Yeah, can do. Good shout. Mute all. You're all gone. I have a feeling that was probably ads with baby music in the background. Yeah. Perfect. So, what I don't want it to be is the world with a view to Craig Spicer. I want it to be delivering information, based side of things. So, hence the reason why I wouldn't normally mute all of the mic. What we can do is to enable it so you can unmute your mics. You can unmute your mic. You can chat as you go. If you've got questions as we go, please just unmute your mic or give me a signal, and we'll answer the questions as we go. Because if you have a question, you'll probably find that someone else is thinking exactly the same thing, and we can get all that information out. I will welcome first and foremost Dean to the discussion. He's in my top left, but can you give us a wave just so that everybody can see you? No, don't give us a wave, Dean. Give us a wave, Dean. Hey, there we go. So, Dean, he works for the Army. He works in the physical training corps side of things. Dave signed up with his iPod Sumo. Very nice. Hello, Dave. Nice to see you too. He's muted. Good. Perfect. I shall carry on. Dean and I discussed last night quite a few things. Dean will take a couple of the sections on here today because it's an area that he has a lot of expertise in. I'll welcome a few more coaches as well. We've got Joel and Colton from across the seas. A couple of my Elico buddies who I'm sure will be able to deliver a couple of bits of added information and experience from their side as well. That's not to suggest we haven't got coaches here as well. Mark, I know, is a coach up in Scotland. Who else have we got? Where's he gone? No, he's disappeared. Oh, microphone is unclear, keeps fading in and out. Hold on, I'll dial in my internet. Cool, that should be a little bit more. Cool, if that connection keeps going, let me know and I'll try and change that again. I've just changed my internet from my website to my phone. Hopefully that will sort. So I'm hoping if I spotlight that video, you should now be able to see what is on my screen. Everybody should be able to see that. And this is what we're going to look to copy or look to run through today. So we're going to look at what motivation is, the outcomes from today. By the time we finish this section, I want to be able to have a look at what your goals are. So whatever your goals are now, potentially they might be the same, they might not be. Hopefully we'll have helped reflect in this session, and we can then, hold on. Let me have a look at my sound.
Craig, it's better when you're stood in like the middle, to be honest.
Like this?
Like not facially, but noise-wise.
Cool, no drama.
When you're going off to the side.
Susie's giggling. I'll stand in this space and I'll just talk, so it's much easier that way. Cool. So what I want to be able to do is look at what your goals are, how they have been affected. So how they're affected going through your the lockdown side of things, going into isolation, how they might be affected, how your motivation's been affected, and what you can do about them. So the first thing I want to look to do is to define the key goals, your the key definitions. We're going to then talk through probably 3 models for motivation or models for goal setting, and then we'll look at a basic discussion about things like motivators, extrinsic motivators, and how they affect you and how you deal with them. Certainly for the lockdown side of things, but I won't keep it specific just to lifting. Because I know that obviously with this lockdown side of things, there's more to it than just the lifting side of things as well, with the emotional side of it. So basic dictionary definition of motivation I've written down on my other board is a reason or reasons for acting or behaving in a way. That's our kind of bog standard definition from a dictionary. Dean and I kind of touched base last night. We quite like the old one. So the older version of that is by 1977. And he defines motivation as the direction and intensity of one's efforts. Now, I particularly like that one in discussing it with Dean last night, in that when it refers to particular efforts, it has neither a positive or a negative connotation on there. So depending on how your efforts go, we got someone with a mic on. Dangerous, Dave, isn't it? It's always Dave.
What's the matter?
Turn your mic off, slag. Cheers, bro. So depending on...
You're really quiet.
Is that better? Can you hear me now,
yeah.
Dave?
Yeah.
So depending on how you look at that, whether it is a positive or a negative at the moment, it can affect you in two different ways. So with the definition of the direction intensity of one's efforts, how you can manipulate that is how we want to kind of look at it. Obviously, we have a couple of different models I want to talk through. There's the really basic models. So we have the SMART principles. So specific, measurable, achievable. You can either have recorded or realistic. We have time bound, and we have exciting, which is the one that when you look at a principle for goal setting, if you're not setting a goal that excites you, you're probably not going to be motivated well enough for it anyway. So you probably are going to want to rethink about that sort of things. So we look at those in a specific area. Is that goal specific? So take an example. I currently snatch 60 kilos. I want to snatch 70 kilos. It's specific to my goal. It's specific to what I want to be doing. Is it measurable? I have to dictate when I want to be achieving them to and achieving them by. Is it achievable? Where am I currently at now? What's my limits? What am I in a position to work towards that goal? Do I have the technical capacity? Can I work towards that at all? Is it realistic? So obviously that comes into account with it being specific, having the technical capacity and the time-bound aspect of it as well. Being recorded is normally where, and my personal preference is, and I have a coach as well, I would normally record it with a coach and go down those sort of things. Let me just check that's not for me. Perfect. Cool. So I'm guessing nobody's got any more questions on SMARTer principles. You've all had it before. You've all heard it before. It's nothing new. Say now if it is. Perfect. So a better model that we kind of look to formulate goals around is the GROW model. The GROW model kind of feeds from your SMARTer principles. It includes a couple of them, but it makes you think a little bit more about how you set those goals. So obviously G stands for goal. We've already gone through that side of things. The G in the GROW model stands for goals. The reality then takes into account whether it's realistic, absolutely. So it pinches that R from your SMART principles, but you have to look at the bigger picture when it comes to reality. So this is where the intrinsic and extrinsic side of things starts being taken into account. So with respect to your goals, obviously before we have the lockdown side of things and you're setting goals on whether it's realistic or not, you can reflect on it and look at things like, do you have the time to fulfill that? What are the barriers to fulfilling that? Do you have time with your working day, with your non-working day? Well, at the moment, most people are on lockdown. Everybody has the time. So time isn't now really a luxury. Time is something that we have. It's a little bit more pleasurable to be able to have those times. But with that, motivation becomes hard because we don't have to force ourselves to make time to do the exercise. We've got loads of time. So actually getting motivated to start that is now not an easy thing. So that's something we can start to reflect on and take into account. You've also got the emotional side of things with, are things realistic? Or how is that reality being taken into account? So we can't see any of our loved ones. So I, for one, am quite a close family. It affects me quite a lot that I don't see my family, let alone all of my athletes and all the people I interact with on a daily basis. So that sort of things I find quite hard. In fact, it's one of the reasons I set these up so that I can still have that, even just the banter. We get together on a Wednesday night. It's for nothing more than keep in touch, trying to stay real and keep things realistic. Options. I've written a few notes on options as well. Do you know within your goal and within your framework what your options are? Is this goal something you can do on your own? If it is something you can do on your own, do you have the skills, the acquisition, the technical capacity, the direction, and the drive to complete it on your own? Is it something, option-wise, that you need a coach for? If you need a coach, what do you need a coach for? Do you need a coach to help motivate you? Do you need a bog standard PT who is just you're literally paying them to motivate you? Is that what you need? Possibly not. And in my opinion, it's not going to be the one thing that drives you on a bigger scale. What sort of coach do you need? Do you need a technical coach? Do you need a strength coach? Do you need a strength and conditioning coach? Do you need a mindset coach? What coach is going to give you the best aspect to your current skill set and framework that you currently have? Time is another option that I put in there. So we've got to take into account that we have a lot of time now, and it's much better that we have a lot of time, which is great. But I hope, and for you guys in America, this might be slightly different for you because you're at a different stage than we are. I think we were slightly ahead of the curve than you guys were, maybe 2 or 3 weeks. But we're going to be at least another 3 weeks. I'm going to surmise maybe another 6 weeks at least in lockdown, maybe another 2 weeks. But in 6 weeks' time, that's going to change. Things are going to go back to normal. So when you're relating your goals to time, that's only going to be a short-term thing. So we've got 3 scales of goals. You have long-term goals, medium-term goals, and short-term goals. So we're having to adapt those goals now and looking at the options that we have within those time frames for the medium-term and short-term goals. How does that then impinge on those long-term goals and how it will affect them? We're going to have to kind of redo, but it needs to be taken into account. Otherwise, it's going to increase trait anxiety and stress when we go back to normal and we start panicking again and going into the same kind of term as we are now. Restrictions I've got, but that's more down as restrictions within the options that you have, looking at things like peers. I know from talking to a lot of people over my time in predominantly barbell sports, a lot of people that do barbell sports have friends that don't do barbell sports that frankly just don't get it. We're not necessarily, health is a massive thing, but when we're looking at performance, it's not necessarily for health. So they don't kind of get it. So you get demotivated by spending your time with those peers. Now in this lockdown time is not really a time where you want to push those sort of people away too much, because emotionally it's hard enough with the stress and anxiety of it as well. So it's a lot to balance, and hopefully we're going to be able to give you a few key skills and a few things as we go through, certainly from the intrinsic and extrinsic side of things when I hand over to Dean in a few and he goes through the next model and the next discussion point. Oh, Joel's got a question already. Joel, unmute your mic, buddy, and we'll do that open mic.
Yeah, my thing is like, so here we're limited in, those athletes that have full gyms at home and have all the equipment they need. And then we have athletes that have I have some dumbbells, I have a couple of kettlebells. I'm finding a hard time keeping athletes motivated that, yeah, they have a little bit of equipment, but they don't have everything. And they're scared to death. They're losing their gains. They stayed motivated for the first couple of weeks because here in the States, at first it was going to be 3 weeks. And then it just keeps getting extended. And it seems like every time they get extended, it's like a kick in the balls, it's like every single time, how do we keep them? So I'm just curious of, for motivation wise, I'm having a hard time keeping even my super motivated athletes very motivated, knowing they're like, hey, I know I'm losing what I've got. And I'm like, look, I won't lie to you. You're not going to come back to the gym as strong as you were, but now we're basically holding on.
What I would do is I would probably try and set up something like this, Joel. I would maybe get them into a forum where you can talk to them and give them a presentation. The biggest thing I've done with, and I've probably got a group of up to 50 athletes that I kind of work with on and off on a sort of regular basis. The biggest things I've tried to enforce, certainly for those that, like you say, I've got a couple of guys that have 2 kettlebells, some bands, no pull-up bar, and maybe a dumbbell. What I would have tried to focus on are scientific fact. So when you look at things like the ability to, or the how let's keep it in layman's terms, how you lose your gains, or how long it takes to lose your gains. So looking at absolute strength, you lose absolute strength beginning from about 21 days. So we're probably not even quite there yet for a lot of people, certainly when it comes to absolute strength, and central nervous system dissipates even less than that. So that, I think there's a lot of science that says central nervous system can dissipate. It can last up to about, yeah, it's
3 or 4 days, maybe.
Yeah, Dean, yeah, I'm Mike, mate, come on in. I'll finish off what I'm doing first, and then I'll hand you over, but unmute yourself, Dean. I would then discuss with them the focus on taking the opportunity to work on the things that they could and should be working on when they're throwing tin around and they're getting maximum and things like that. So we're looking at things like, we all know that a lot of athletes will drop their knees in as they squat and things like that. So we're looking at giving them opportunities to maximize glute med, stability, overhead mobility, and things like that, unilateral strength, power. The more they maximize their vertical jump, the more chance that they will recruit that absolute strength quicker back when they come back from the gym. Does that make sense?
I've been really trying, like personally, I've been like explaining, hey, listen, we'll use this to build your speed. You know, we'll make you faster, and that will transfer into stronger later. And then isometrics for positional strength, you know, saying, hey, look, we're going to do, you know, towel pulls where they step on the towel and pull like a deadlift, you know, but like, hey, I'm going to have it, you know, different lengths of the towel, just trying to keep them feeling like, hey, look, you are moving, you're going to progress because we're going to work on your weaknesses while we can.
Most of your guys are college or collegiate athletes, aren't they?
Yeah, high school, collegiate, American football players.
So things like maybe, and they probably know this stuff, so put me back in my box if I'm probably going to stuff they already know, but things like eccentric loading. I mean,
lots of tempo.
Yeah, so we get loads of phase 2s in. The first thing I'll do with the phase 2s is they'll do 5 sets of 10 back squats, but a tempo of 10 down, 2 pause, 10 up. They have DOMs for days because they don't realize the loading that they have with body weight that is potentially there. So it's things like that. You'll have the same issues that I have with my soldiers. Dean will jump in, and I'm sure he'll say similar in a minute. But when you work with soldiers and you give them things like tests, they will then start training for the tests, and they start risking injury and things like that. So I would maybe introduce tests that they can't, I'm going to
get hurt.
They can't fuck themselves up. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So vert jump, standing long jump, handstand holds against the wall and things like that. A test that I think would be a really good crossover for maintenance of absolute strength. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure.
Dean, you got anything to add, mate?
I just think it's hi Joel, nice to meet you, mate.
Absolutely.
I can't begin to imagine what it's like working with collegiate athletes. They're probably a very special breed, but I think the biggest thing for me with clients is deciphering their wants and needs and trying to give them a new direction in which we can challenge their strength or challenge their focus in terms of what they're trying to achieve in progress. So I've done things with my clients and given them a different stimulus. So we've looked at things like reactive neuromuscular training using bands, or we've incorporated different varieties of tempo, like you said, and Craig alluded to gymnastic movements. I think for me personally, what I found really, really useful, particularly with my clients, and I think Glenn is a great friend, a great client of mine as well, and he'll no doubt vouch, we've got different community-based challenges to keep people motivated within the realms of what we're trying to achieve. And, you know, you could put out a typical team workout and do it on a Zoom session. And for me, I found that getting a community-based feel with the clients has allowed them to somewhat stay motivated towards the driver for that week. And the challenge will change from week to week, which for me has probably been a little bit of a godsend. And I think Glenn will probably vouch for that in the fact that, you know, these different challenges, although they seem mad in some respect, but they keep people engaged and keep them driven towards that process and that journey at the end, which it is to get back into the gym and hit those all-time numbers that they wanted before.
Change of direction, isn't it?
Yeah, that's it for me. I had to sit down and go through each individual client, and it took time, and say to them, you know, where's the direction? What are we going towards? What have we got available? And sort of make semi-bespoke patterns that they could follow. But in a long shot, at the end of the week, we could all come together and do some sort of community challenge, which would allow that motivation to keep steering forward. I don't know if that would help in a collegiate level. For high school guys, I really don't know, but maybe that could be an option that you could possibly look toward.
Yeah, no, I've made like one challenge a week. So when in their programming, like on Wednesday, everyone has to video a challenge and then submit the video, which turned into being like a logistical nightmare because trying to go over 100 videos of somebody doing 20 minutes of air squats wasn't a great idea on my part. So I should have thought a little more, but I love it. It makes me feel much better that I'm going down the right path, and some of the ideas you guys have given me are really going to help.
Maybe reminding them that they are competitive athletes, and the amount that they maintain in the ways that you give them will help them stave off or keep their gains in comparison to their other athletes. So I'm just reading the message in. All right, everyone can see that one. That's good. Who's that? Liv, unmute your mic.
Oh.
Right. Yeah, I was just thinking that a lot of the stuff that was being discussed then. So Charlie's just had a baby a couple of weeks ago, and she's a weightlifter. Dean, you probably know her, Charlie Goebbels. And she's like feeling a lot of those same emotions that people have been talking about tonight, of like frustration, losing gains, not having access to the stuff that she would normally be doing. So like, what a valuable opportunity that whilst we're all kind of selfishly thinking about ourselves and all of the athletes that you guys train, so you're thinking about it en masse to like really learn some lessons that could be valuable for like postpartum clients in the future.
Yeah, I think so. I think the thing that I think is quite nice, and I will maybe try and cut it out somehow and put it out, is that these things they're not here just because of COVID-19. These things are all very natural things to deal with. They're just happening to everyone at the same time, which to some extent is a horrible tragedy, but to another extent, that's a fantastic thing because everyone knows how everybody feels. And the amount of people that we've actually got doing training now is fantastic. There's a lot of people out there, albeit running, which, you know, is my obsessive tendencies are twitching a little bit, but hey. Oh, Gary's going as well. Yeah, we've already touched on those goals, Mr. Allen. We'll maybe
come on to those ones.
Yeah, what we'll do is we'll go through Dean's section in a minute, because I've very, very much almost done my bit, so I can hand over to Dean. What we can then do is we can then open out and go, right, who has a goal that still doesn't understand, who has a question, and we can all thrash it out. Colton and Joel, please, you know, if you want to unmute your mic, if your backgrounds are fairly quiet, you guys are experienced as well. You jump in and share your knowledge as best as you can. So the only bit I think I had left, which was probably the most important, and probably the one that I spend most of my time with my athletes. Most of my athletes are individuals rather than teams. I gave up team sports maybe 8 or 9 years ago. Let me just stick myself back on gallery view. As much as I love to just talk to you, Olivia, I'm going to talk to everybody. I gave up so all of my stuff is predominantly only barbell sports now. So I deal with individuals, and having the will is a massive, massive thing. It's very different for everybody. I know Gary, asked the question in the group earlier, and we will answer it, Gary. We will get to it probably towards the end on how do I sign myself up for that one lift. It is a really good question, and it is a question that I will answer and give my opinion on how I think it needs to happen. The will comes from, for me, inside. Dave, he's here somewhere. Oh, he may have made it. Oh, Dave's made it onto another page and everything. The will, Dave is very good because Dave's will doesn't change at any point at any competition. His will is the same every time. His will is his own personal identity to do well. That's it. He is not normally, I'd be naive to say that he wasn't influenced by external pressures. Absolutely he is, and he wants to do his best to everything else. However, 80% of his drive is from him bettering himself, which is a hard thing to do when you've got a lot of other things going on as well. So, what else have I got for will? So I'm going to talk for maybe 4 more minutes, Dean, and then I'll hand over because I've got a couple of really good examples of intrinsic and extrinsic wills. There are a couple of really good bits from a really good book called The Talent Code. I've got the guy's name now, but if you haven't read it, it's a really good book. Let me know if you haven't. I'll find you a link. I'll ping you over it. Just let us know. Send us a message. The Talent Code kind of looks at the whether talent is born or whether talent is nurtured, and it gives, for me, 2 really good examples of 2 different sports. It looks at kind of the Soviet Union in tennis through the 80s, and it looks at the individuals who, certainly through the 90s and early 2000s, a lot of the Soviet Union countries were bringing out massively talented tennis players. They were literally taking over definitely the European stage and a lot of the world stage, giving the Americans a good run for their money, being a sport that the Americans had dominated certainly during the 70s and 80s. And this wasn't ironic. It happened for a reason. There's a lot of poverty through the 70s and 80s through the Soviet Union countries. The only way, or one of the only ways, to actually get out of poverty was to perfect a sport and get state funding and do well. The other side of it was that there was masses of access to tennis courts, tennis coaches, certainly through places like Russia. The Czechs were very big for that side of things as well. I think Switzerland was actually quite a good one. Roger Federer came through another one as well. So he kind of came through the backsides of things. Djokovic was another one. You had both things. So you had the internal motivation, so the intrinsic side, which was, I need to better myself and my family. I want to do well. I want to compete. I want to get away from this poverty. You had the external side of things, which was third world countries, a lot of poverty, which would drive them to do these things. And it then drove a lot of very, very good top level sportsmen. The other example that I thought was really good was it's actually a sport that was created off the back of football. We've heard the tiki-taka football from the La Masia, which is Barcelona's famous, where they bring up all their youth. It wasn't originally invented there. It was originated from South America through Argentina and Brazil. It's a 3-a-side game predominantly, with a small-sided ball that is normally filled with foam, so it rarely leaves the floor. It only leaves the floor if you give enough intention to do so. You have, I think they're called favelas in Brazil, which is where the slums of Brazil. It's a very poverty-stricken country, still is. We saw in the Olympics a couple of years ago that it was very poverty-stricken. You're either in poverty or you're not. It's as simple as that. And I think a good 90% of Brazil is still within, a poverty-stricken area. However, if you can play football and you can play football well, it's your opportunity to get out. So futsal was played on the streets. Futsal was played in schools. It was played everywhere. What they realised that by playing 3-a-side and by playing short, fast matches, they found every single player had more touches of the ball from a young age and developed skills much better. So instead of, and we look at, the 10,000 touches that it or 10,000 passes or movements it takes 10,000 perfect movements to perfect a movement, as opposed to 10,000 poor movements to perfect a movement. That's probably one for another day. But these are getting those touches from the ages of 6 to 9. So they're already good at what they do by 9 years old. Whereas we in the UK, and we've only just started playing small-sided games. I mean, as a kid, I loved playing football. I stopped playing football a couple of years ago, but I probably only touched the ball 4 times in a 90-minute game when I was 14, because that's what we did. So the amount of kids or the amount of populace that were good at such a young level was so great, and the external poverty side of things of getting out of there created these awesome Brazilian football players that we saw through the 70s, 80s, 90s, and we've started to see them come over to Europe much more now. It is affecting them in a different way, but we can see now how it's created that generation. So in a perfect world, we need both that extrinsic and intrinsic motivation to be perfect. What we can do individually is be aware of what those motivators are to motivate ourselves extrinsically and intrinsically. And as coaches, for the coaches that are amongst us, we can then start to read our athletes better so that we can ascertain how to motivate them both intrinsically and extrinsically. I think that brings us nicely onto young Hammond, who is going to take you through the third model.
He's like a walking encyclopedia, isn't he? Literally.
Myself for a couple of minutes, mate.
You call yourself Craig WikiLeaks. My goodness. Absolutely brilliant. Yeah, guys, I'd like to very quickly sort of redefine how you should be looking at your goal setting. I think it's a misconception about what models work and what don't work. Me and Craig spoke at length yesterday about the SMARTER principle. And the SMARTER principle that you spoke about is a very myopic tunnel vision approach. It focuses on a destination rather than on the identity and the journey and the processes that you should be considering, either as athletes or as coaches, in order to reach and fulfill those goals that you want to make as part of your identity. And we spoke at length about a different tier model and a different approach that you guys can use. And the 3 things I think, which is really important to consider when you're trying to redefine how to be motivated and set your goals, is you need to look at your what, your how, and your why. And those 3 things will determine how you shape the model, which I'm going to speak to you about shortly. So when we look at the what, we look at what do you think needs to be done in order for you to reach that goal. If it's motivation that is lacking, for example, and this is a reason you've dialed in on this call, look at what you can do from an extrinsic or an intrinsic perspective to help you shape how you're going to do those things. So me and Craig spoke about music, for example. So for me, motivation, I'm a very habitual person. I live off of routine, as most people in this group I'm sure do. Routine is the habit, and those habits are ingrained within my identity. And the one thing I always do as a motivator is I will always put on music 30 minutes before I go and lift, whether it's a strength and conditioning session, whether it's bespoke energy system development, or whether it's, dare I say, I get on a bench every now and then, I do a bit of powerlifting. Even if it's one of those, I will always listen to music 30 minutes before I go in as an extrinsic motivator, in order to help me achieve that how. So how I'm going to then attack that goal. So then we look at how are you adapting all those things we spoke about, and are you ready to then implement those changes? So motivation is a real tricky question, because we all get motivated in different ways. Some people like to be shouted and screamed at. Craig's one of those guys that likes to be calm and collected and be cuddled before he goes to a bar. But other people are the role reversal, and understanding that identity within yourself is a really, really good thing to decipher before you then set your grow model or your SMARTER principle. So I'm going to sort of lead on to the bit I wanted you to sort of understand. So when we look at SMARTER principle, like I said, gives you a very tunnel vision. It's a very myopic approach. It focuses on the destination. Whereas if you look at something like the grow model and We search through things that Craig went through when we look at the goal. Is it realistic? What are the obstacles in my way? And what's the will for you to then get to those goals? That gives you that motivation within you doing that grow model will allow you to identify lots of process-based goals in order to achieve that outcome, whichever it may be. And that's a really, really important thing to take away, is that a lot of people use a SMART principle. They focus on a destination, they achieve that destination. Well, then what do they do from that? The goal's achieved, they sort of stop. Whereas the grow model is one of those things that allows you to constantly dip into all the time and change based on the position that you're in, where you are with your goal, where your motivations currently lie. And if you've read a book called Atomic Habits by James Clear, he puts out 3 distinctive phases. And we utilize something called identity or process-based goals. Especially for motivation, the identity goals that you set are going to be very journey-centric. So when we think about you as an individual, if we imagine a dartboard, in the center of that dartboard is your identity. Around the outside of that layer, you'll then have your processes. And then on the outside of that layer is then the outcome. And I think a lot of us will shake our heads here, definitely, and probably agree with me, that 9 times out of 10, you are focused more often than not on the outcome, rather than enjoying the journey and the process in which to get to that level. And that's something I probably have a lot of issues with some clients, is that they think, right, I want to hit, just as an example, I want to be able to hit a 100-kilogram snatch. Okay, that's fantastic, but they're so focused on achieving that outcome that they forget about all of the small processes that we put in place. And 6 months down the line, that one individual athlete may have improved their shoulder stability. They may have changed the angle at their hip when they're in the overhead position. They've increased their speed, their rate of force. They're able to do lots of other different things that they didn't necessarily think about as part of the process because they're so focused on the outcome. So that's the one thing I think is quite good to take away, is that if you can look at your identity, the process, and then the outcome in that order, you'll probably be a lot more motivated towards what you're trying to achieve. And that fits into everything that I think Craig spoke about before. I think the other thing to note, and Craig, please jump in on this part if you feel you've got something to add here. We spoke about an analogy about plotting the tree. I heard this from a friend of mine called Jens. He's a great coach. He runs a small business that looks after body composition and taking people that have done very sedentary roles into an active lifestyle. And he uses something called plotting the tree. Now, me and Craig spoke about this. If you imagine at the very top of that tree, you've got your highest hanging fruits. Now, those highest hanging fruits that you've got at the top of that tree are the outcome goals that you want to achieve. So regardless of who you are in this meeting now, if you're a powerlifter and your goal is to hit a 200-kilo squat, for example, or if you're a weightlifter, or even if you're somebody that, for example, wants to hit a half marathon row, we take that highest hanging fruit and we think about all of the small, low hanging fruits that are underneath that tree that we need to put in place in order to reach those highest hanging fruits. And the best way what that does is it allows you to create, again, processes. It allows you to create external and internal motivators within your own climate to achieve those highest hanging fruits. And it kind of allows you to buy into the process more. So from a coach's perspective, and Joel, I don't know if this helps you, from a coach's perspective, if I can get those athletes to understand the processes and the identities that make those outcomes, I'm going to have a bigger buy-in from my clients. And as you as athletes, you will have a bigger buy-in to your process as well. So that's one thing to take away. I had a picture here which isn't drawn very well. What I'll do is, Craig, I'll send it to you and maybe you could fire it out to the rest of the guys. Yep. Unless you can see that on the screen.
Hold up. Probably can now.
Can you all see that on the screen, guys? It's all back to front, isn't it? So that doesn't make any sense.
Dean, that works, mate. If you keep it there.
Oh, does it? Okay, bear with me. 2 seconds. I've got to get my head out of the way.
You are the only thing they can see, mate.
Can you all see that, guys?
Yes, it's good.
I've had a little bit too much coffee today. I think I'm shaking a little bit.
No, it was
Right,
good.
so-
It was focused, everything.
Oh, brilliant. So I just want to quickly elaborate on that. So on one side of that, reverse engineering your motivators and your journey, you've got the goal. And the simplest thing to do, the first step in us to do that is to break that goal down into manageable wins. So let's say whatever your goal is, that's a pretty simple task. Anybody in here can do that quite easily. The next stage is then to educate yourself about that journey. So find out, if you've got a fantastic coach, which if you're being coached by Craig, I'm sure you do, find out what you need to do. And that's the education part for you to get those small wins in your goal. So it could be, so Craig will have a process in place, a skeleton in place for a small female athlete to reach to a certain level. He'll have a different skeleton and a different model that he'll use for a male athlete, etc., etc. Once you've done that, the last phase in that is then to remove that overwhelming sensation. So remember, this lack of motivation that we're feeling in this isolated period is just temporary. And although it's overwhelming to a sense that you sat there thinking, Jesus Christ, I need to get back in that gym. I've lost all my gains. I'm feeling pretty deflated. You know, the muscles are feeling pretty low. I'm not feeling very motivated at all. Try not to let that overwhelming feeling take over what your end goal is going to be. You just need to change your goalposts, realign and reassess what you can do in this present moment in time to achieve a different goal. And like we said, that could be something as simple as, you know, utilizing bands or doing deck jumps or plyo jumps, etc., etc. So once we've achieved that model, we can then look onto a starting point. But far too often, people don't break that point down. They'll go straight in and start, and then they'll figure out where they're going to get to later on down the line. If that's one of you people, I cannot recommend enough than using what Craig and I have just spoke about with regards to the growth model and understanding what your highest hanging fruits are. Because once you've done that, the smaller wins can be celebrated, like I wrote down, and then the goal can be achieved a lot easier. And therefore, your intrinsic and extrinsic motivation, or intrinsic motivation, will be heightened more because you've gone through that process and allowed yourself to achieve those elements. Craig, do you agree with that one? I think we've
absolutely, yeah.
We've hit that one there.
I think that the difference is probably that. In fact, if I cancel your spotlight, it will show me as well. I think the difference is probably that the people that work with coaches and that have experience kind of have the bit that we've kind of taken you up to now, almost have it done for you. I know that my lot, and I know the Dean's lot, probably most of Joel and Colton's lot are all being looked after, and they're all kind of being guided. So this is also for and helping the rest of my guys that are here as well. But this is also for those that don't have a coach that's going to go, this is the skill. This is what goes into the work in the background that coach does in the background, and puts all that sort of stuff through it. Give me 2 seconds.
I think Gary's put a great question on. Gary, if you do you want to just give a little bit more context on your question about obviously overlaying real life and the routine, etc.
Yeah, so I think it's routine is great, and so currently I get Craig, or outside of a COVID response, I get Craig to program for me. It's sort of like a 3+1 program, 3 or 4 days a week. Works really well. But being military, there is almost no such thing as a normal day. If you remove the military and apply small children or grown-up children or fucking dogs, sorry, swearing, or the
always one, Gary, always one.
It's normal me as well.
I'll join you.
all of those factors that affect everybody sat on this screen tonight can take away your sense of routine. And it might be a macro influence, as in you simply don't know what time you're going to finish work, so you don't know if you're going to get to train that day. It might be the micro influence that is your, as you say, 30 minutes of music before you get to the gym. Actually, you might not have that opportunity because the kid takes 30 minutes extra to go to bed. Just go to sleep, you bastard. So actually, what you've then got, you've lost your 30 minutes of music and you've just got to get into the gym. So it's really trying to say, yes, absolutely. In a perfect sense, you set up your routine, you go to the gym Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, days off, whatever it is, with a 30-minute pre-music routine. How do you,
No.
or are there any tools to basically
Yeah.
take away when you can't get your routine and what you
Here's,
don't want to do?
Here's my, bearing in mind my response is, I'm going to go back to last week's version of the card I like to bring out quite a lot called It Depends. So you're a coach, Gary. I know you're a coach. I know you well enough to know that you're a coach. So I don't need to worry about you overtraining. I probably do actually with you, but that's probably a laugh. But you know what overtraining is probably more to the point. I didn't say overeating. I said or overindulging. I meant overtraining. So we have two things that I would probably look to give you to put those mechanisms in place, knowing that we have a relationship already. So it takes into account all the fact finding that's come up to it. You've got the minimum recommended dose to maintain and the minimum recommended dose to make progress. So that strips out everything you don't need. All the extra accessories that are nice to have. Gary's got dodgy glutes, his knees keep dropping in, he doesn't keep his core stability well enough. We take away all of that now. We take away all of that. We need to deadlift once a week because you're a conventional lifter. We need to squat twice a week. We need to bench twice a week, and we need to hit these thresholds. That's it. If that's the minimum you can get in, that's what you get in. And here's the program. Plus, if you can get these done, this would be a nice to do to your optimal recommended dose. And then you've got your maximal recommended dose. So you've got those kind of three things that would go in there. Dean, go on, add now, mate. Go on.
So Gary, yeah, I'm in your ballpark. I've got two young girls. They both lead a very busy lifestyle. I'm in the military. I work at Sandhurst, so you can imagine what that time frame is like, what the diary's like, what the calendar's like. I sort of live off a little bit of a weird message, and I know this sounds a bit strange, but I work off of there is always time. There is always time, and this is what I come down to. And again, Craig's obviously mentioned it depends. If you have gone through the processes and the structure, and as a coach, if I've done the assessment and the onboarding strategies correctly, then everything in my power and everything in your power should be put into a routine that allows us to achieve what that goal is. Now, if we commit to say something like 4 1-hour sessions per week, and yes, we have kids, yes, we are army, we're military, we're God knows where all the time. I struggle to understand. For me, it's a real struggle when I hear clients say to me, I just can't do it. And then we break, and it's very rare that we have that because I've gone through the onboarding process in depth and detail, and I've not overwhelmed them with a training program. I've not overwhelmed them with any specific structure that's going to kill them too much, particularly like you were talking about when the kid gets in the way, the dog gets in the way, and then everything else adds up. I think the best thing to do is, like you said, it's hard. I get it's hard, but there is time. Whether that's us motivating our asses in the morning, getting up at 5, 6 o'clock, and dare I say anybody does that in isolation during this current climate. But if that means somebody gets up and we get up at 6 in the morning to go and do that training session, because that is what is so important to you and is driven towards your goal, then that's what we do. But that being said, I do understand that people have different family issues. I don't think there is a way to overlay the real life scenario like you put in when you put your question out. I don't think there is a way to do it, but I think there is. It is really hard. And Craig, I'm sure Joel and the other coaches that are on here, that they'll vouch and say it's real difficult to really understand where you can make changes. And if you end up being a babysitter.
Sorry, can I just jump in actually? So let's just shoot and absolutely take your point. It's one of those. It's probably the key challenge. Whether as a coach or an athlete, and you say, you know what, today I'm too tired, I don't want to go and train, whatever it might be. The feedback is there is always time. So yeah. I suppose the question is, and without overlaying an RPE kind of percentage type discussion,
get out.
Yeah. but no, well, that's the key point is there. If you're not feeling it and your coach or your program says, whatever it is, sets a 5 at 80%, you're not feeling it. So how do you educate your athletes that not feeling it, a 5x5 session at whatever they can do for the day is just as important as hitting an 80% or whatever it might be. And it's really those sort of tools that we need to give our athletes to enable them to change and develop their own training sessions.
It's not just the training session, it's the mindset towards each training session as well. So obviously you've worked with me long enough to know my ethos anyway, so I'll talk as if you don't know, but I'll explain quickly my dislikes towards RPE. My dislike towards Gary's laughing already. My dislikes towards RPE are it's very touchy-feely, and if I give an athlete if I tell an athlete to go out and do an RPE 8, everything's going to be an RPE 10, and they're going to max out because it felt okay. Whereas I prefer to term it with, here's my prescription. If it's 5x5 at 80%, then go out and hit that number. If you're feeling really good and you're moving really well, injury prevention is good, and you're nice and tight, then add a little bit of weight. That's fine. If you're feeling really bad and you're moving really, really poorly, take the weight down or get out the gym. It's fighting the right battles at the right time and doing the right thing at the right time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a really key point, actually. Discipline and motivation are just as applicable to walk away from a training session as they are to get through it. And I think that's a really important message to send, particularly in current climate where there is uncertainty over almost every aspect of daily life. It's okay to not train for a session.
Yeah.
Hey guys, can I add something? Gary, I think you've made a really good point there, but I believe somebody put it on the group. This is the greatest one-liner I think there is going. Nobody in this group, to my knowledge, is a professional paid athlete. And that's the biggest message, because one session is not going to change your overall goal. It's not. It's just not one. Exactly. It probably will do you good, but one bad session or one missed session or 2 missed sessions is not going to change the overall goal. And as a coach, if that message isn't being relayed, then as a coach, we're doing our job wrong. If you're not identifying a common ground, if you're not identifying from a grow model what those obstacles are for that individual athlete, as in mother with 2 kids, has a dog, is on her own, her husband works away from home, etc., etc. If we don't work out what those obstacles are, then we're not doing our job as a coach and giving the right prescriptions that are manageable for the lifestyle that they're currently living. And that is the underlying principle. The fact of the matter is that none of us are professional athletes. If you are a professional athlete and you're getting paid round the clock, then that is a completely different approach that I'll take with an athlete, because that's their livelihood. So therefore, not only are they extrinsically motivated, they're going to be very, very extrovert and introvert. They probably have both of those characteristics in the fact that they'll get up and get that done because it's their livelihood. But for yourself, is a prime example. You know, you're in the military, you've got a residual income, you're being paid, etc., etc. There is, if it's difficult, I get it, but one missed session is not going to change the world. Even a week is not going to. In fact, dare I say it, this lockdown is not going to change the world. It's just not. It's as simple as that. I think people sometimes, and I've had this often in the past, especially with when I've taken people that have come from a CrossFit background and come into strength and conditioning and wanted to understand weightlifting, etc. They go through this crazy ideology that volume has to be the key. And they have to do 6, 7, 8 sessions. If they miss that session, they're going to be losing gains. And I'm like, slow down. We need to realign everything that you've just gone through, because what you just said. You're not even
making gains.
Exactly. So the biggest message I think is like we went to before. You talk about, we talk about as a group collective, if we're trying to get to a common goal and you and your coach are trying to get to that common goal, if you can't do a session and there are things in the way, then what we do is we move things, we communicate with each other as a coach and an athlete and make those changes very dynamically. I think that's the best way to do it, especially for somebody that's in the military as well. And I've got about 60, 70% of my clients are military. they all have the same the same problems. You know, God knows where they're going with this COVID-19 stuff, duties, etc., daily taskings, being on tour, etc. We just have to be dynamic in that instance, I think.
I'll add two kind of little bits of gold, hopefully, to that before. I know Shep wants to ask a question in a second, so I'll add these two things very quickly first. There's two things that I recommend, and one specifically that I have tried to put in place with my lot. Two things that can help you manage fatigue. Everyone here, just gives a thumbs up if you've got a smartwatch that takes your heart rate. So if you've got a smartwatch, no matter how bad it is, it will give you an overnight resting heart rate. Have a look at that every morning. If that overnight resting heart rate is up by 5 beats per minute, then just reflect on your training. See how you warm up, see how you feel. If it doesn't feel so good, take 10% off. If your heart rate is up by 10 beats per minute, don't train. You have something coming, or you're overtraining, because your central nervous system cannot cope.
That's being dynamic.
There's one other thing that really responds to overtraining before your muscular system does, and that is your dynamic side of things. So your standing jump. It's not so good on a standing broad jump. It's very good on a vertical jump. I try to do this with my guys, but it's a little bit too much admin. It's not as easy to do as wearing a watch and going to sleep. I tried to initiate a standing jump test every Friday after training, so it was on the same time every day, so that, and it's pretty much the same. It's not as much as 10 centimeters, but your standing high jump or your standing vertical jump is down, then your central nervous system is overstimulated and you are either overtraining or you got something going down. It's pretty much that. I think that brings us nicely on to Super Shep. Shall I unmute you?
Please, mate. How's it
Go,
going?
mate, go.
Yeah, so some great points there, by the way. I've kind of learned the hard way that it was like enjoy the process rather than the outcome. Because, like you say, like you pick a goal, like I've got like I want to do 110 snatch.
Hallelujah.
You'll stick like a 12-week training block onto it, and you'll get to, and you'll have like 3 misses at 105 or something like that. Like that's kind of been how it's been. But so, like how I work my training back is I just pick the competitions now, and I just reverse engineer my training back from there. So, like for example, like the British champs would be in summer or something like that, and that'd be a qualification period for Europeans or Worlds or whatever like that. So, what I'm struggling with now is that now the competition calendar's just kind of like gone out the window. I mean, whereas like before I'd have like got like 3
absolutely. So we're now training. The Masters is likely to be with the national championships. Our national champs, sorry guys, which will now be in November, probably end of November. So I envisage it being a combined British and English champs together. And I would suspect that they will run the Masters champs exactly the same dates. It'll be a Friday, Saturday and Sunday. But that's not until November. So what do you do? Because you're going to work back from that, aren't you? Now, from a coaching perspective, and you're not daft, Shep, I know that you know stuff. So we know roughly that it takes 4 to 6 weeks for physiological adaptation to take place. So you probably want a similar stimulus, so that being either a hypertrophic stimulus or a strength stimulus or a power stimulus for a period of 4 to 6 weeks, with a bit of a deload going into the next block, with a deload going to a next block. So that is your stereotypical linear programming, but you could then weekly undulate that system as well. So you could do 1 week stimulus of hypertrophy, you could have 1 week stimulus of strength, 1 week of power, and then continually replicate that. There's so many programming options that from my perspective, I could do almost anything to keep it interesting for you. So the biggest thing I think for you is you need to keep it interesting and you need to not overtrain.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's a long block, isn't it? Like if it was potentially November, like normally, like say my main focus of the year would be like the November one. I'd have like maybe 2 or 3 run-up competitions in that where I wouldn't really care if I was like a bit overweight for my class or something. Like I'd go and just get like platform time and just get lifting in front of a crowd or something, like trying to recreate the the
same stimulus.
uncontrollables of what you're going to go for in a big one, rather than just getting like now, like a lot of us here are going to be, you know, we're going to have nothing for however long or something.
Absolutely. So I suppose I'm relatively seasoned. I've probably been, so powerlifting wise, I did 5 years. I did loads of different competitions, both nationally, internationally, and done the same in weightlifting and other sports as a kid before I was poorly and all that bullshit. So for me, I now have it that I'm the same at every competition. It could be a world champs, it could be the army champs. I am exactly the same at every competition. Because, as Dave giving me some shit, screw you, Dave. I know and understand myself as an athlete and how I respond. I'm going to speak for Susie now, knowing that I'm aware of Susie's previous relationship with previous coaches and things like that. So I know that Susie's previous coach would program her a block, and he would tell her, or they would tell her exactly what she is going to lift at that competition in 12 weeks' time. And I'm not a magician, and I can't do that. So I have discussions. Of course, I have discussions with my athletes. Dave wants to squat the world. He wants to sort his shoulder position out over the bar because it's really sloppy. I'm only giving him shit because he's muted and he's giving me shit in the chat. But everyone has goals and everyone sets a target. Liv wants to pick up 150 kilos. I know these targets, but outside of them going, this is the target that I want to do, we don't talk about it. Because progress is progress, and progress isn't necessarily just weight on the bar. Technical progress and positional progress, specifically for both. Everyone's T-bowled with 150. Specifically for both powerlifting and weightlifting, are massive progress. And once we have technical progress and focus on maximizing that power into, I'm ignoring the chat now, maximizing that power into the bar, whether that be weightlifting or powerlifting, depends on the progress that you have. So a lot of people will just get hung up on, I need to squat 200 kilos, when actually what you do is exactly the same every time you touch the bar. If it's not right, for fuck's sake, I can't help but see that chat popping up. If it's not the same every time, or you're missing lifts, it can't be the same every time. So it's not necessarily the weight on the bar that's the issue, it's what you're doing that's the issue. So I'll revert back to your, I want to snatch 110, but I'm missing 105 3 times. There's got to be a reason why you're missing that 150. So it could be that you're not hitting that extension. It could be that your shoulders are so fatigued that you're not securing the bar. Your lower back might be fatigued, so you're not controlling the bar through the second pull. It's not in the right position overhead, so you're losing the bar. So there's a number of different things that could be that rationale. At the moment, I think you are centered on that number. And whilst that number is always going to be what you go for, and only that number, it's going to haunt you. And it'll be exactly the same as, and I think, and I mentioned it last night, I steer clear of nutrition because for a couple of reasons. I'm good with nutrition. I like nutrition. I know what I'm doing with nutrition on a very basic level. I don't like the relationship that some people get with nutrition and the obsession that you get with the scales and things like that. And it's exactly the same relationship. So for me, oh, Dave, you bastard. I'm the same size as a medium-sized girl, all right? So, oh, hold on. Liv, would he benefit from close coach comp management? Few comps not knowing what's on the bar. Yeah, 100%. 100%.
Jump in.
Let me explain that one. So Liv's just put in there. So for those that weren't on last week's call, I brought up that Tilly, one of my girls who is both a powerlifter and a weightlifter, in both powerlifting and weightlifting, she never knows what's on the bar. I manage everything at a competition. She just approaches the bar and executes the lift. She has no idea what's on the bar. So I think for someone like Shep, actually, and I know at a competition, Shep, you quite like to have control, don't you, on what your lifts are and what you're doing?
Yeah, 100%, mate. Yeah.
Yeah. So it may be that your relationship with those numbers are now are wired so tightly that your arousal level is so high that you're not focusing anymore on the positions you need to hit and the key cues for you. You're now focused so much on hitting 110. It's exactly the same for me on a 100 kilo clean and jerk.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't saying I was getting stuck on like 110. I mean, I am actually getting stuck on 110, but like, you know, that's not like, I'm not going crazy because I'm going like a little bit adrift because, like I say, I'd have these kind of like set blocks of work where, you know, I'd have like maybe 3 12-week blocks or something to a competition. I'd be able to take 2 weeks off and like, you know, I have a full like deload or something, or, you know, so, and numbers wise, like I would just, you know, I'd never pick my openers until I'd like warmed up properly and just see how I warmed up and then just do some tactical changes and stuff. So I wasn't so much getting stuck on the numbers or anything. It was more kind of like I'm stuck on the like I say,
how to structure.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because I love the process. Like I love training, I love the accessories, I love all that kind of stuff. But and I've got like full on setups here, like where I live and stuff. Like I'm still working, but I've got like platform outside and loads of weights and stuff. But without like a competition looming, I'm just like not really fussed.
Zoom comp.
Yeah, we
Great
might
comment,
do that at
Alicia.
some point.
Zoom comp.
T,
Chef,
we
I'm
might-
just going to jump on something.
Right,
I'm going to jump on something there. Chef,
Yeah,
are you being coached at all?
Yeah.
It may be worth speaking to your coach and seeing if you can come up with a new structure that's allowing you to still be motivated towards the common goal. Because at the moment, it sounds to me like, obviously with the nationals and the comps and the champs and everything being completely written off with COVID-19, it sounds to me like what you're after is you need something to work towards. I think there's a lot of us in here. We need something to work towards. So it might be worth having that conversation with your coach and just saying, look, is there something we can do which you can work towards? Can you, in this current process, can you work to a new total? Can it be a Zoom conference where you work to a new total? You know, and something like that allows you to put a systematic approach in place that is not too overwhelming and still gives you that motivation to drive, get up and go and do those sessions. Because like you said, that I cannot see many competitions coming, and especially the ones leading up to the English, like the regional level comps, they're not going to come up soon. Like I said, exactly. And even then, I would argue that gatherings are going to be small, they'll be manageable, and it'll be a completely different atmosphere. So is there something your coach can do now that's going to allow you to change the structure in which is being applied to your current training program? Because it sounds to me like you're at a dead end. It sounds like you're just doing the programming or the sessions, etc.
Yeah, totally.
Because, you know, and not to put words in your mouth, but I'm just saying like that sounds like something that I've experienced myself and with other athletes. And it's about just rejuvenating the program, redesigning that process, reevaluating those goals and saying, what can we do? What can we honestly do in this time? And that's a conversation I think you're going to have to have.
What within the list do we work on?
Yeah, and there's lots of different avenues you can take with that. But yeah, mate, I'm more than happy to give you some sort of steer points without stepping on your coach's toes at all. But more than happy to help out where I can. But yeah, like I said, I think that's a conversation you need to have with your coach and see if you can reshape where you go forward with it.
Yeah, cheers.
Just to stay motivated, mate, and especially with the champs, because if they say, right, November, it's going ahead, and you're like, shit, I've got 6 weeks, I need prep. You know, you still want to be in that stage where you're able to push those numbers out and still get those totals. So yeah, it'll be a difficult one.
Yeah. I know it's uncertain right now, but I will be shocked if there isn't something sorted by November.
Yeah,
I think we all will be. Another question here, Craig.
Go on, Richie.
Thanks so much. So, yeah, essentially the question I'm asking is, if you are to try and avoid having a pure focus upon the numbers, especially if you can't get to a gym and train the way you would, how do you make these measurable? Because obviously you can sort of take small victories in perceived improvements in technique and, for example, recovery and things like that, but often they're so subjective of either yourself when you're being self-reflective or of your coach, that I often find they could be quite hard to sort of motivate yourself from that, because it is so dependent on sort of how you're feeling on the day or the
And
interpretation.
ultimately, what we're training for is extra weight on the bar.
Yeah.
I would now. Obviously, I know that Tilly is programming you, so it's an easy answer for me. Chat to the coach, explain that situation, ask them if you can have some form of testing process within that as well. And the way I do it with my guys is I will have spotted in the midst of about 4 weeks a 2 or 3 rep max on each of the 3 lifts. From a 2 or 3 rep max, you can use I've forgotten his name now, but there is a formula that you can use which estimates your 1 rep max off the back of a formula. Weight multiplied by reps multiplied by 0.033, adding in the weight back in again gives you an estimated. I can stick that.
Wendler.
No, it's I've got his name now. That's going to annoy me because I do it on every workshop.
I say if you Google Wendler Max calculator, it's the same formula.
It's
You just
yeah,
probably
it's very similar.
I think another one to say to add to that is your question you were referring to is sort of they are small like videos etc. They are so subjective, but simply based on feeling. Even if you feel as though you're making progress, if you feel like you're getting depth in a squat, if you feel like your stability overhead is improving, your balance, you know, there's so many small little tests that you can put into your program that will keep you ticking over. Have that, like I said, Craig said, have a conversation with your coach and see what he can put in as, again, a systematic set of tools that you can use that's going to allow you to achieve whatever it is that you want to achieve. And again, it all comes down to redefining that goal process. I think all these questions do come down to that, you know. And if your coach hasn't been in touch with you in this interim period where it's a very different change to what we're all used to, then I would question you would need to get in touch with your coach, because your coach should be in touch with you saying, what the hell can he do or she do for you? That's what they're there to do. They are there to find out ways in which they can help you achieve a common goal. And that's the key message. It shouldn't be like I've just lived by that the conversation that they should be having with you to figure out what you want. You know, by the sounds of it, you want to see those little changes. You want to see those little wins. And how can we do that? Well, for me, straight away, I would be looking at video feedback with you and mirror side-by-side images, mirror side-by-side videos, and being on a weekly check-in basis where we can talk through some of the small wins that we've had that week, like I do with my clients. Like there's ways to do it. So maybe that could be a conversation, you know, try and get those small systematic tests or reviews or whatever you want to do that's going to allow you to stay somewhat connected to the process.
Does that help, dude?
Thanks so much.
Perfect.
I think, Talisha, online competition, that is exactly what we need to do, Talisha. Couldn't agree anymore.
I
could not agree.
The only issue is, like, without a gym open, I can't even touch a bar. I haven't touched a bar.
That was my point.
Like,
that's
all
great.
I can,
if you got kit, that's great. If you've not got kit,
I'm struggling to like I can easily spend 2.5 hours in a gym every day, even after a 12-hour shift, with absolutely no complaint whatsoever. But I'm struggling because all I can do right now is run in tab, and like finding an hour out of my day to go do a 6-mile run just makes me want to blow my brains out. Like I just like not being able to touch the bar for an extended period of time is really hard to find the motivation to like do anything really.
I'll elaborate on a point there. I've had a few clients that were in the same process and in a similar sort of situation. They couldn't get the access to the kit. So it was about sitting down and redefining the skeleton of their session or skeleton of their week that would allow us to still make some sort of changes. And I think Joel mentioned it earlier about isometrics and building solid positions, looking at tempo, and simply put, you just look at different ways that you can do unilateral and bilateral loading. By single leg or single leg or bilateral or double leg squats, for example, different loads, odd objects. But you need to have a framework in place that's going to allow you to be accountable. Because at the minute, if you don't have any structure, you're going to be pissing in the wind, essentially.
I think I'm like struggling because like the last time I wasn't in the gym for this long is when I was going through army training. So like my end goal was to be in the army. I could totally understand not being in a gym. But now it's like, well, I'm in the army and my end goal was to make English, and I was like 7 kilos off. So, and I was in a really good like training rhythm, like going to the gym every day and always
But
finding the time.
you can still
And
have
then-
a really, really good training routine. You can still have a really good training routine, providing you find a coach that has put the time and the effort into designing the skeleton that fits you. Because you can
like
still
I do have it. It's just different to like try and like when you love to be in the gym and you can't touch a bar, to then find that motivation to do the things that you know that you have to do because it makes you better at your job, but not the goals that you had is the struggle.
Can I take a shot at this? Talisha, one of the things that comes to my mind is, you know, the other thing that kills us is the unknown of how long is this going to be.
Yeah.
You know, we have to keep this up and knowing, like you said, you have these goals, you had all these drives, and now you can't even touch a barbell. You know, I listened to a podcast earlier today where they were talking about, okay, so let's say it gets lifted in 2 weeks and we get back to a barbell. One of the concerns we have is, one, we've talked about the time off is actually good for us in probably some ways, but then second of all, you know, going right back into heavy lifting dynamic, we have to be radically careful of injuries, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So they were talking about doing a lot of plyometrics, doing a lot of things. And for me personally, like, this is hard because I'm a very, like, I like structure. I still set my alarm at the same time. I do all these things because
I still wake up at 6 a.m. every morning.
Yeah, I'm the same way. And one of the things that has helped me, and I literally had to start implementing this, and I'm still trying to, you know, dial it in, is literally every day I need to write down, like, this is what I'm going to do today, and not think about tomorrow in 2 weeks, because I don't know how long it's going to go. So if I can write down the things that are going to make me feel like I was productive, I got things done today, then I know that I go to bed at the end of the night knowing I did everything I could that was on my list. And it's absolutely not optimal. It's not perfect, but within your situation, it can be optimal, right? So like, rather than run 6 miles today, say, okay, I'm not going to run 6 miles. I'm going to do, you know, 12 400-meter runs. You know, I'm going to work on speed today. I'm going to do 6 40-meter runs with full recovery, and just changing it up every day so that the monotony of the Groundhog Day every day. And if we don't write something down, we're all creatures of habit. We go right into the rut, the binging the Tiger King on Netflix, right? You know, it's one of those things that if we don't absolutely hold ourselves to a schedule, and that's like, and when I mentioned earlier, the discipline thing, look, sometimes you can't just say, you know, buck it up and just do it. It's not so simple.
Doesn't always
and
work that
being
way.
able to have discipline to set a schedule and follow it. And look, like we'd said, sometimes today not being able to train, we have to be able to be honest with ourselves and explain why that can be a win as well.
Yeah.
Right? We're not, it's not winning the game as a whole, it's winning it play by play. So if I just focus on the play right now, I can still win by doing, you know, 100 air squats, 50 squat jumps, whatever. That can be a win. And it sucks because what would I rather be doing? I'd rather be with a barbell. I'd rather be in a gym for 2 hours. I'd rather be like feeling completely smoked and ready to go to bed because I'm exhausted.
Yeah.
But I think we really have to focus on the little wins and just be content right now, focusing on the now and not trying to focus on the how long are we going to be stuck here, because none of us truly know.
Scott, did you have anything to add?
It's pretty much actually Joel's just gone through. I don't know, Craig, do you know Tommy G?
Very.
You know what he is. You know what he does. He among other things, he manages the gym that I go to, and as part of his their support for all of their members, he gave out, and he also works a lot with small companies and self-employed people and helping them be productive and what have you. And he basically gave us a template. Now, if I bring it up and I'll just read it out to you. He gave us things to write down, being in these blocks. 1, wake up, breakfast, work block 1, workout/activity, lunch, work block 2, hobby downtime, study and learning, dinner, social time, and bedtime. Where you fit those into your day was completely down to us, and it suited me down to the ground because I was working from home, so it made the work block really easy. But it was a case of and it has been the days that I haven't done that, I haven't stuck to that, I've gone, as Joel says, straight into that complete rut of just sitting down, tea and biscuits, just watching Netflix all day, being asked 4 times if I'm still there, still watching. As soon as I've lost that discipline, especially with things Craig knows about, I spent 2 weeks where I wasn't able to see my son because they were isolated, and I'm an incredibly lazy person by nature. So having the routine of going to work, then going to the gym, it's all part of a structure that stops me being that lazy self that just is happy to do absolutely nothing and become completely depressed all the time. So when we talk about discipline, it is literally that, is replacing the structure that you had before with your daily life. Now, I know for the army guys it can chop and change a lot, but for me, I get up, I go to work at the same time, I have tea breaks at the same time, I have lunch at the same time. Coming away from that and being at home, you just lose all motivation, or not necessarily motivation, because the motivation is still there. I've still got competition booked in August, which hopefully will go ahead. I've still got the goals 2 years down the line for masters in English or whatever, but the discipline wasn't there, so I just didn't do it. I stopped working out, and that tool, just having that tool of having your day planned out, makes a massive difference. And it probably then, as you've spoken about, Dean, previously, it's also applicable to what you're actually doing in terms of physical activity, making sure that you have a plan and that plan is aimed at meeting your goals.
I think it's probably one of the things I almost wanted to kind of finish on, so I'll go with it now, and then if there's still questions we can, because I know quite a few people are probably itching to get away now, but I agree exactly what you're saying, Scott. I started the lockdown when my son was in theory still at school. My wife is absolutely amazing on getting all of that kind of added to his day and his schedule. So he still had school time, he still had play time, he still had PE, which I did when I was off. So he had that structure. For the last 2 weeks, we've not had that, and he's just had Easter holiday. And it's awful. I almost feel depressed. I don't have a structure. I don't have a routine. I hate it. So the first thing I've done this morning is sat down with my son and gone, right, going back to school tomorrow, what's the routine going to be? We're going to do this at 9 o'clock, this at 10 o'clock. I have to have that. We might not completely stick to that. I'm not a complete Hitler. I probably am, but not a complete Hitler. I won't force him to stick to it completely, but I need that as well as much as is for him. So similar to what Joel's done on what stuff am I going to do today, a lot of people, it will affect your sleep if you have a lot of things going on in your mind. So my recommendation is probably to sit down probably early evening and write down, what am I doing tomorrow? What do I need to achieve? What do I want to achieve? What am I doing tomorrow? And have a structure for your day, a rough weekly structure for the next few weeks, because it might only last a few weeks, it might last a couple of months, but a definite structure for stuff you want to achieve. And the biggest thing I wanted to kind of, along with all the whole, I hope the motivation side of things that you guys have all kind of taken away from it, and I really genuinely hope it has helped. The biggest thing is that, and Dave is one, if for those who can't see him, what's up Slags is Dave, the champ. We've taken we've taken COVID-19 as a massive opportunity. He's been able to get kit, would only normally train 4 times a week. Here he comes. You can unmute if you want, mate. But he started to struggle a little bit with motivation and getting stuff done, and he had all the kit, but not necessarily as motivated to get it done, because he's on his own in his house. It's not so motivating. It's not, even if you have all the kit. But what we have here with COVID-19 is a massive opportunity. All the stuff that we've always wanted to do, potentially, if you're not at work, and thank you very much to those guys that are at work still, but if you're not and you have more time, what an opportunity to nail down and do all the stuff that you always wanted to do. Now for Dave, that means that we're no longer training 4 days a week. We're training 6 days a week. We're not training as intense, but that stimulus is much more steady over 6 days a week. So he wakes up every morning going, I can't wait to train. There's only 1 day a week that he's not training, but we've managed his intensity throughout that week. So he's getting more stimulus, he's getting more from it. Yeah, he's not getting the motivation he's getting from the club, and he loves Bionic Branch Barbell Club. Shout out to those guys. But I'll take a note to what Dean said very early in the conversation. Dave never changed the music. He always just, everyone else gives him the motivation that he needs. Put music on first time this week, had an absolutely banging session because he never used music before. So it enthuses that side of things. Take this as the opportunity that it can be, and I really hope you can use and develop the skills that we've kind of discussed as we go through. The only thing I'll probably talk about now is I'll go back to Gary's initial suggestion of how to get pumped for a lift and things like that. So if you want to hang around and talk like that, or you've got any more questions, then please hang around. Don't feel as though you have to go. Other than that, if you want to get away, please get yourselves away. Dino, I will say thank you very much to you now, mate, because I know you're going to get away at some point in the next few. So massive thank you very much to Dean, dropping some knowledge bombs, really enthusiastic, and I love what he does bring to this. So thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, just a quick thank you from me as well, Craig. Guys, I hope from my personal standpoint, I hope you enjoyed that. I hope there's been some good details. I left a little comment in there. If any of you want to get in touch, I'm more than happy to sit down and go through structure, planning, etc. Not just from a psychological perspective, but from a physical perspective as well. And I'm more than happy to, maybe have a chat with some of you in the future. There's what Craig has said, there's some top level coaches, some top level athletes in here, and it'd be, a community like this is what keeps this motivation alive. And I think that's what people miss. This community that you've just created inside this room is a catalyst that's going to allow you to drive forward. And you're probably going to go into tomorrow and have an absolutely booming session. And I hope you will do. But on a serious note, from me, Craig, thank you. And thank you to all the other guys. If you do need anything, please, by all means, drop me a message. I'm more than happy to jump involved. I'll probably hang on for a few more minutes until my little girl decides to scream the house down a bit more.
Perfect.
But no, genuinely been an absolute pleasure. So thank you very much, Craig.
Legend. Cheers, bud. So Gary, with reference to, and you can unmic if you want, so we can actually have a bit of a conversation going. Unmute and go for your question that you asked earlier.
So really, it was we've looked very much at the big scale. How do you get out of bed, set long-term goals, get that motivation into your daily routine? This was very much focused on, and we touched a little bit on this last time or in one of the group sessions, about the tools that people use to get focused for that one particular lift. Now, there are lots of tools out there, and this is more for the group than anything else, whether it's salts and ammonia salts, whether it's shouting, whether it's music, whether it's people slapping on your back. It's really just a discussion around all of those, let's call them popular techniques, to separate it from those goal-setting long-term programs. How do you get yourself in the zone to hit that one lift? Bearing in mind, and particularly for the weightlifters in the group, where it is a far more technical sport. So actually getting into a Hmong strength, I'm just going to lift the bastard weight up, doesn't necessarily apply for the weightlifters. And you've got to be aggressive but controlled. And it's
let me just
really that piece.
There, mate. So the technical aspect of, so when you get really good with, keep your mic off, Gary, because we'll conflab as we go. Where you get so I don't want to blow smoke up the champ's arse, but I'm gonna. When you look at something that how Dave executes, not his bench because his bench is diabolical, but when you look at his squat and his deadlift and how he executes them from a oh yeah, seen Mark. Mark, if you want to talk, take off your mic as long as it's fairly quiet in the background. He executes it very well from a technical perspective. So whilst
do you see my front squat today?
What's up, Dave?
Do you see my front squat today?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, let's not talk about that, mate.
Yeah, I think we all did, Dave.
Everyone's seen your front squat, Dave. So whilst, yes, I agree, Olympic weightlifting is more technical than powerlifting. At an elite level, Can't believe I've just said that. At an elite level, if you are not technical in the lift, then shit's going to go wrong. So there is still the same technical element, even in a conventional deadlift. If a conventional deadlift's at 400 kilos, there's going to be technical aspect. If you don't execute that the right way, it ain't going up. Shit bust. So you almost need to take the technical aspect away from it, because the technical aspect has been done. The technicality of the lift is how you execute the lift. It's the getting in the zone is now no longer about the technical aspect of the lift. It's how you engage with the lift and engage with the environment at that time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, perfectly. Happy.
So I'll give a quick 2-minute background, certainly for those that weren't here last week. I'll give the Tilly story, because Tilly's story is a great story. Tilly, a very good lifter of mine, originally in powerlifting, now doing powerlifting and weightlifting, has always been a very strong young lady. Originally, when I met Tilly 4 or so years ago, she was an RAF powerlifter. She would scream during the warm-up, literally like she's going to kill someone. She'd scream when she sat on the bench. She'd scream before she set up a deadlift. It would be like she was going to murder someone. Anyone that has been at any comps with myself and Tilly in the last 12 months, you probably wouldn't even know Tilly was there until she's on the platform and makes the lift, because she just keeps herself to herself. She doesn't even know what's on the bar. It's that quiet, that much of a change. It's such a change that it's almost a completely different human being. Now, I know many other people that would scream and shout and need to get that pump, need to get in the zone. Ironically, it is normally the less technical lift, so a conventional rather than a sumo deadlift, if that makes sense, would be more of a scream and shout, hit me, slap me, all that sort of stuff. It doesn't differentiate. You can have that happening in weightlifting and in powerlifting. My biggest question to you as an athlete is, and it's one that I'm going to steal from young Olivia, and I will put this out on my page at some point, is what is your why? Why are you doing what you're doing? Now, again, I'm going to use Dave as an example, because Dave, anyone that's seen his squat, it's like a metronome. We have worked hard, Dave more so than I have. I just do the numbers and all that sort of stuff, on making sure it is almost exactly the same every single time. So when we put a weight on the bar, the weight is just the weight on the bar. It's no longer about anything else. So when Dave approaches the bar, it is the same, exactly the same every time. So he doesn't need the hype. The hype doesn't need to happen, because he's just doing the same as he does every single time. So the one I'm getting at there is that if you're not used to being smacked and having hype in the training area, why is it going to affect you and make it any better in a competition? However, I think it's a massive waste of energy. Who's that? Big Glenn. Yeah,
so
go on.
I just jump in there, actually, because, and this is an interesting one. If you take the military as an example, one of the things we do that is arguably a pointless exercise, but relatively
I know where you're going. Carry on.
Is march across a field with your bayonets fixed, stabbing it into sandbags, and you practice your war cry and your war face whilst doing this. The whole point is to get you mentally in the zone for a really aggressive moment, and part of that is that sort of natural peaking piece, the adrenaline rush, whatever it might be.
Can I just say though, Gary, that as a member of a female platoon, we did that in silence. Genuinely.
Yeah. Let me ask you a question first, Gary.
Sorry, just to jump in, Craig.
They psych out to do what?
Well, you're going to kill people.
Exactly. So it is an ultimate act. It is something you probably do need to be psyched up that much for.
But I think there is an element of that, psyching yourself up for a all right, it's not sort of ultimately nobody's dying on the platform. Occasionally people might piss themselves, but that's fine. But again, there is the drawing on your natural adrenaline, your body's responses to these aggressive situations. And actually, just to sort of touch on Liv's point there, I think it's really interesting. There is a male and female aspect to how you psychologically prepare yourself for a big lift. And it's interesting that you use Tilly as an example of somebody who shouted and now doesn't, when there is an awful lot of male lifters that certainly get into the hype. And I certainly have no real basis for any of my comments. These are really just discussion points.
No, absolutely.
And it was part of the driver for the question, because I am very much an internally focused person, and I won't say I've bought into the hype of slapping and smelling salts and all that sort of stuff. But it's something that I yeah, we're unmuted. So it's just a really interesting discussion point to see what people do to get themselves in the zone, whether it's remove themselves from everybody, chat and laugh because they're quite relaxed, and if they're relaxed then they can, just not quite enjoy the lift but actually not stress themselves out. All of the different aspects, that's really part of this discussion, is to promote discussion as opposed to
100%. So I'll add to it, because there was also a couple of slightly surprising things that you might not know about me. When I lifted competitively, powerlifting, I would always use salts for my third deadlift. And I'm obviously not an advocate of salts, but it helped me on my third deadlift to get psychologically associated with the bar much better. I also tend to get hit in my legs and my upper back on my third clean and jerk, because I feel the sensation of my legs being used much more. But if I do it more than once on the clean and jerk, it just pisses me off. And I've only found that out because I found that out. And that would be my advice. In your first year or two, or this next year or two, Gary, if you haven't experimented, take some time to experiment. I forgot his name now. It's one of the lads that's jumped on the conditioning side of my programming. He's a big 110 RAF lifter. Literally wanted me to beat him up before he got on the platform, before he benched, because it did it for him. And he is normally he's a big lad. He's a very quietly spoken individual. But I would literally batter him as he was going on the platform. I've done it for 2 British Championships. I probably would have done it this year as well had it been on.
I'm not gonna lie, I'm loving Claire's suggestion of doing a mini hacker before I get on the platform.
I mean, you put the suggestion out, Claire, so I think you need to be you need to show that it was done. I am predominantly a very calm, a very collected person, but my coach Christian will hit me on my third clean and jerk, and I will ask him to hit me, which is quite unusual when his face is like, you don't like that. In my first comp, very quickly, in my first comp, someone offered to slap me before I went and did my opening squat, and I literally told him I would rip his head off if he touched me.
Can I slap you?
Yes, you may, but only on the glute area.
I think it's an interesting one as well, and it's while we're talking about the psychology of lifting. The first lift, and this is the point, your opening lift should be something that you should comfortably hit. So you shouldn't need psyching out. And the point is, I'm not psyched out. I've hit my opener. It's comfortable. I'm comfortable. Now I can get on with the rest of the day. So actually the psychology between the lifts on a comp day are also quite an interesting, probably a sidebar from this evening. But again, it's that third lift that is worthwhile discussing. People do something different, and I'm the same.
Yeah.
When they're going for something big, a PB, and it's whether that is valuable, useful, or indeed counterproductive, as it seems a lot of the comments are inclined to agree with.
So I will lean on the side of competition experience then. If I have sent you out on your third lift, and we've not had the discussion of you need to pull this to win, I'm not sure whether it's there, but this was the difference between winning and second and third place. Go out and do your best. If I've not had that discussion and I've sent you out for your third lift, it's a lift that, having seen your second and your first lifts, how the bar moves and how you've warmed up, I anticipate you hitting that lift. The only thing stopping you are technicalities on how you execute that lift. Does that make sense? See how I perfectly timed that so that you had your mug in your mouth? Now, obviously, that helps when you've got a coach who has experience and has seen the barbells move and has been to competitions and judges competitions and takes all the stress away from what position am I in, what do I need to win, and all that sort of stuff. Reading the board is a whole nother discussion. If you don't have that, it does become very stressful because you've suddenly got all these things kind of raining on you, trying to figure out, is my last lift on the board? Is that including my third lift? Is it not including my third lift? Do I need to hit this? Do I need an extra 2.5 kilos? That's 2.5 kilos more than my PB. I'm not sure if I'm suitable for it or not, blah, 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 blah. And it all comes into that sort of thing. So that's where the stress kind of comes into it. That's where a coach comes in and helps manage that stress. I don't like calling it stress. Stress is always a bit of a negative connotation, so I will call it arousal. Arousal always sounds nicer, but arousal can be a good thing, but it can also be a bad thing on competition. What stress? Scott, you bastard. You can be over aroused. I was waiting for those jokes. You can be over aroused and you can be stimulated too much to be able to then focus on what you're doing. Say that again, Scott.
I've never managed it yet.
So if you are over aroused, they are normally those people who are hyped to live in daylight. They've just been beaten up on the way out. They've eaten some chalk. They've got all the kit on, everything that could get the music on. The music goes on as well. It's blaring. It looks like someone's like killing bats and stuff out the back. But they get to the bar and they look like they don't even know what they're doing. They don't even know where they are, and they completely fuck up the lift because they are completely overstimulated. They no longer are focused on anything connected with that lift. They are focused on everything that is external of the lift, which kind of brings you back to that intrinsic and extrinsic stimulation.
Yeah, most studies about stress will show you a sort of a bell curve of distribution. For those not familiar, it is the shape of a bell. What that means is actually on the upward slope, a stress response is actually a positive thing. And it's quite a finely balanced situation where you get enough stress so that you respond positively to it. But not too much stress, then it negatively affects whether it's your technique or indeed your psychological approach to the lift. So yeah, absolutely agree that some call it stress, arousal, interest, whatever word you want to use, Craig, is actually a really good thing.
Yeah, it's really hard managing that as well. And that comes from knowing your athletes and being honest with yourself as well, which brings me back to one thing with the goal setting side of things. Be honest with yourself on what you want to achieve, why you want to achieve it, and what you want to do. If what you want to achieve is stimulated by external stimulus, so it's what I think my dad wants me to do, is your kind of standard thing. My dad's always wanted to do it, so I should do it. It's not from you. It's not from here. So you have to really own that goal. You need to believe in what you want to achieve. Otherwise, you are going to go onto that platform, onto that third lift, and you're not really going to want it because you don't want it. Everyone else wants you to want it. Does that make sense? And that's not something that is easy now because motivation's pretty hard to come by. Cool. Any more for any more? I think we are good. Perfect. If you've got any more, guys, please let me know. If you've got any subjects you want me to cover in the next few weeks, please just send me messages and all that sort of stuff, and we'll keep in contact. Thank you very much for staying awake for 2 hours. It's nearly been 2 hours. Really enjoyed it, and I hope you have too. Thank you very much.
That's great. Hey, great session again. Really enjoyed that tonight.
Yeah, we'll do it again next week. And those that are Crazy Strength will also do a social Wednesday as well.
Thanks very much, mate.
Love you. Bye. Stay safe.
Bye.